Well, good morning to all of you. Some of you will recognize the collect that we said at the beginning of the service. Give us grace to cast away the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. That prayer is ancient, at least if you think that 1549 is the olden days. It was written for the first book of Common Prayer as the English Church separated from Rome, and we hear it every year at the beginning of Advent. But for centuries, the Church of England prayed that prayer every single day of Advent. Cast away the works of darkness. This isn't the long journey of Lent. It's about today. This season of Advent is about throwing out whatever can't stand the light or survive in its life-giving ways. The Advent season is all about light. The great beginning of John's Gospel is adamant. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. Advent is focused on light and hope and love. Put on the armor of light. Armor is protective and life-saving. It offers strength for journeys that may take us into harm's way, and life is filled with those. Armor can be a gift when the crazies are calling for your head. Armor can also prevent us from discovering the gifts of others or recognizing what God is doing in our midst. I was teaching a religious studies course decades ago, and one of the students really seemed distressed about what we were learning about Bible scholars' understanding of Jesus and his ministry. I asked the fellow after class how it was going, and he puffed up and he said, "Oh, my spiritual armor is getting stronger every day." I think he meant that he didn't want any new ideas messing up his worldview. I'm not sure that that kind of armor leads to enlightenment. I think the armor of light is more about doing what Jesus did and what he said. He engaged people who disagreed with him. He was curious about how they understood Torah, the law, and he asked people about their hopes and fears. Jesus was vulnerable. He didn't put on defensive clothing or self-protective words. He told the truth without hesitation, whatever the consequences might be. He healed people who weren't deemed worthy in that society, and he had compassion for people without a shepherd. Jesus always chose righteousness. He was clothed in it like armor that pervaded every cell of his being. Righteousness is about upstanding behavior and acting justly and being on the right side of judgment. Jesus was also humble, but never humiliated. Humiliating behavior can't penetrate the armor of light when people know that they are beloved of God. Humility recognizes that we're made of the earth, that humble humus, and that we're endowed with the living gifts of God's Spirit. Humility goes along with vulnerability. Mary's great song, the Magnificat, claims God's justice. Justice that brings care and relief for the poor and humble, and upset for the rich and powerful who are usually already pretty well protected. That kind of overturning challenges us all to recognize and claim our own vulnerability. Vulnerability can be an invitation to change, to open our hearts and our minds to what God might be doing in the very next moment. The armor of light is permeable and therefore it's creative. Walter Wink tells a story about a small boy who got on the school bus every day to be bullied. The perpetrator was a lot bigger, and depending on the day, he would demand the little boy's lunch or his lunch money, and if nothing was forthcoming, the little boy got pummeled. One day, the little one got on the bus and tried another way. He blew his nose into his hand and walked up to the bully and said, "Oh, I've always wanted to shake the hand of a real bully." And the big kid was horrified, and he kept backing away until he finally plopped down in the last row of seats on the bus. Goliath is felled by a nose. You have to wonder what the other kids on the bus learned that day. The armor of light has been borne by many in our nation's history and the world's. The Puritans came here to escape British tyranny. The Hebrew people fled from Pharaoh's tyranny. The Boston Tea Party protested excessive taxation in much the same way the people of Judea protested Roman taxation in Jesus' day. Brutality, enslavement, unjust punishment are still with us. And progress in removing those scourges from society has almost always been led by people on the margins. The armor of light enables people on the margins to deliver other people. David fells Goliath. Jael, a woman, does in the Canaanite general and delivers Israel. The Hebrew prophets repeatedly indict Israel's unrighteousness and urge a return to godly ways. The civil rights movement named and exposed entrenched violence and inhumanity. Formally dressed marchers kept going in spite of dogs and fire hoses because they had put on the armor of light. The armor of light took the form of a rainbow as people on the margins struggled to enjoy the rights and privileges of their fellow citizens. We've seen athletes step up for justice for all people at significant risk to their careers, whether they are Chinese tennis players or American football players. Those who are armored in light proclaim by word and example that all people are created by God and are beloved of God, whoever they are, whomever they love, and wherever they live. The key is about a transformed heart of compassion that's willing to side with the vulnerable, whatever danger is lurking. The armor of light is strengthened by practice, and it's annealed by regular examination. Is my confidence about being right turning into arrogant self-righteousness? Or is my armor still permeable? Can I engage an opponent with humility and at the same time hope to learn something? Righteous decisions somehow seem to come more truly in a community when the discourse and partners in that discourse are diverse, when the community is open to varied perspectives, and when we're willing to do the hard work of deep conversation. We have to show up like the boy on the bus if we want to help create a world more like the kingdom of God. The gospel today is a warning to maintain that armor of light. Jesus says, essentially, you're going to need it because all sorts of danger and distress and disaster are near. We can't just sit around like the other kids on the bus, watching the violence and dehumanization. We can bring light into the coming darkness, but we've got to be alert, actively ready to step up. May this Adventtide shine up your armor and bring it close, like Julian's insight that the love of God is even closer than our clothing. Let that knowledge soak into every living cell and thought and action and keep us open and vulnerable. We are light bearers in a darksome world, and the light of love and hope will indeed push back the darkness of that gospel warning. Advent's about refreshing the armor of light. All through this season, we get clues and reminders of it. The feast of St. Lucia comes on December 13th. In Sweden, young girls dress in white and wear crowns of candles and bring sweet-smelling saffron buns. They remember St. Lucy, who was martyred by the Romans in the year 304 because she wouldn't betray her faith. A crown of thorns has become a crown of light. Lucy is the light bearer. And most of us here can remember Lucy Woodliffe's sparkling armor. May we go forth in light and return in light. May we be light in the face of darkness. For ultimately, light wins.